Welcome to the Field Crime Podcast and Mob Talk Sit-Down. We're going to join forces again this week to talk about our series we're working on unsolved mob hits in Philadelphia. This will be episode 3 and 4, the Johnny Gongs Casasanto murder, and we'll also be talking about next week the Gino Marconi murder. Heavy-duty stuff in Philadelphia. One's in 99, one's in 2003. John Taggart from the crime scene unit, who joined us the last 2 episodes, be joining us again. John, thanks for coming on the show again.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks for having me.
Okay, we're going to start with a little breaking news, if we can, before we get to that. We've had 3 police officers shot this week responding to a domestic violence situation and a shooting up on Whitaker Street. As they arrive, according to the police, the person who had shot someone inside the house turned the gun on police as they literally arrived on the scene and opened fire. 3 officers were shot, a female officer and 2 male officers. A sergeant was the rank of one of those officers. They were shot in the legs and the arm, I believe. And the suspect who opened fire on them was shot and killed. John, when you were with the crime scene unit, you were the guy they called right away when these kind of things happened, you and your colleagues, but you came almost immediately because there were police shootings and you've done so many of them. Your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I always sat at my desk with a radio, so I would hear it before anybody else probably, or why it was going on. But the way it works is police radio calls crime scene on any shootings, stabbings, murders. And that's the only job that we don't have to wait. Once they call and say a police has discharged his weapon, we immediately pack up our stuff and go. So we don't have to wait for a search warrant or till you want the scene to be safe, but I want to get out there as soon as I can, because you know what happens at these scenes, and especially Whitaker Avenue. It's pretty busy there and stuff gets trampled. You just want to get out there as soon as you can. And I know our people did. I know I spoke to people last night.
Yeah, and the way they do it nowadays is they not only rope off the crime scene, but then they use red crime scene tape to tape off the area where the shell casings or ballistics are to preserve that.
Yeah, the red crime scene tape was made to, what they're starting to do now is get DNA from bullet casings. And anybody in that red tape area, they call it the hot zone, they're supposed to wear a mask while they're collecting ballistics evidence so they don't cross-contaminate. But we've have gotten some jobs where they've gotten, like we were always told early on, that you're never going to get DNA off a bullet casing, because once it's the primer struck, that gets so hot for a little bit that it just burns off DNA. But they're getting DNA off of bullet casings now,
and that'll help solve a lot of cases. Obviously, in this case, you don't need to solve the case because the suspect is dead. Give me your reaction to, as a police officer, and you were a police officer before you were with the crime scene unit, when you roll up on especially a domestic violence or a domestic violence / shooting situation like that. You don't know what you're walking into. The mayor made reference to that at the news conference. The police commissioner made reference to that. You are arriving on the scene and somebody's opening fire on you right there. You do nothing but react in a situation like that.
Yeah, I don't know how the call came out. I know there was somebody shot that made the 911 call. So I'm sure they were on guard a little bit. Luckily, they only got shot in, only 2 legs and an arm, which is pretty. I mean, it looked like it was fired from a little bit of a distance.
Yeah.
The cops returning fire, all their casings looked like they were on the street to me.
Yeah.
I wasn't there, so I don't know, but just based on the aerial photographs and the circles, I'm sure all the ballistics in the street were the cops.
Yeah. What's the most important thing when you arrive on a scene like that, from a crime scene investigator situation and a detective who's now going to work on that case?
Scene integrity. You just want to rope off everything. I mean, there have been horror stories where guns have been taken from crime scenes by people just walking by. So scene integrity is it. You just want to rope off as big an area as you can, and if you want to bring it down, it's easier to bring a crime scene, make it smaller, than to try to expand it. Because people just back up. Even the news media, they get as close as they can, and
hey, watch it there now.
sometimes you got to tell them, can you just, you try to be nice about it, But the public, they just don't care. They just don't care.
And sometimes you have upset family members arrive on the scene, things like that, and they're kind of, as you can understand,
Yeah, that just
screaming and
heightens.
hollering. I've been at quite a few of those scenes where it's gotten really nasty, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's a shame. I believe it was the 12-year-old's father that ends up getting killed.
Yeah.
Over a video game. It's just, it doesn't make sense.
So in this case, the suspect discharges at police, and then police discharge back. So now that's a lot of ballistics to pick up. You got to make sure you do all that picture-wise, circle-wise, evidence marker-wise, and then collect them properly, correct? Because that's a lot to sort out when you're going to go to court, if in fact you had to go to court in a case like this.
Yeah, but they probably knew early on that this is never going to go to court. So that takes a lot of pressure off. The suspect is obviously down. I'm sure there'll be other investigations to go on, but it's pretty much cut and dry.
Yeah. Okay. Let me shift gears a little bit. We also had some news this week. A horrific video went viral of a bunch of motorcycles and ATVs riding around City Hall. They bump into a car. A female is driving that car. A guy gets off one of the bikes wearing his helmet, jumps on the back hood of her car, and stomps out the rear windshield of her car. Her two children, young children, are in the back seat of that car, and there's another person in the front seat. And the scene quickly escalates when she gets out of the car, goes after the guy in a verbal manner. A gun drops out of his waistband to the ground. He points the gun at her, according to police, and then headbutts her with the helmet before getting back on her bike. And to her credit, and maybe something she'd probably think about twice, she knocks him off the bike and knocks the bike down, which I think people wanted to see her fight back. But in most instances, that's not a good move. The police moved very quickly. In a matter of a couple of days, they tracked all the video down of those bikers around City Hall and locations there. And they were fortunate enough to come up with a video of the guy taking off his helmet so they could actually see who it was. What do you think of that police work that quickly?
We talked a little bit about last week about the video, how much that has changed police investigations. And I probably know the guy that did it, and he's absolutely incredible, and not a divisional detective. He's a homicide detective that he just does an incredible job of tracing video. And like I tell my two girls, good, bad, or indifferent, once you walk out the door, someone's always watching you. And if that creeps you out, I'm doing my job, but someone is always watching you nowadays. And it's just going to get more and more better video. It's more people are going to have it.
Mm-hmm. But that's pretty quick to make an arrest like that. And just so you know, the individual was arrested at his home. According to police, they found the motorcycle, the clothes he was wearing, the helmet, and the gun that he allegedly pointed at the woman. He's been arrested and charged. Last night, DA Larry Krasner his people asked for $5 million bail. I believe the judge granted $2.5 million. That's a lot of bail for a case like this. It's a little surprising coming from DA Krasner, but the fact of the matter is they did ask for it, and they got $2.5 million bail. So he's going to be held. You would easily call him a danger to the community, would you not?
Absolutely. And you know what? Everybody is on his side on this one, but you're talking about a DA that doesn't believe in bail, and now he tried to get $5 million bail.
Yeah, it's a little peculiar request by him. All right, listen, that's the breaking news for the week this week. Since we had John on, he's done many of these situations and tracked down people like the suspect in that case. We're going to go on to the murder we're looking at this week. Is the November 22nd, 2003 murder of Johnny Gongs Casasanto. He was murdered inside his Durfor Street home in South Philadelphia. There's the home right there. Police were on scene, I believe it was sometime the next day when they found out he was apparently lying dead or gravely wounded in his living room. According to the police and all the scenes and all the information we've been given over the years, he apparently recognized someone at the front door of his home, let that person in. One or two other people came in behind that person. As he turned his back and walked into the kitchen from the dining room or the living room area, he was shot in the back of the head and killed. John, you arrived on the scene the next day, I believe, because there was some delay here in this getting reported to the police. But when you get there, the scene's all roped off, and it's a homicide scene right inside. So walk me through what you see when you walk through the front door of that place.
I remember he had a really nice little house there. Well kept, well maintained. He had a really nice kitchen. It seemed like everything happened in the kitchen area. I don't remember what ballistics we got, and like we've talked about this, I don't know if South detectives handled it first as an ag assault before it became a homicide, or we handled it, or the bad guys policed their own brass. I just don't remember getting anything. I don't remember putting numbers down.
Yeah. Tell people who are not familiar with that, what policing your own brass means. What
means once you fire a gun, you pick up your own shell casings.
So you don't leave anything behind for the police to look at.
Anything behind. I just don't remember. Sorry, I just don't remember a lot about this job, other than it was the one mob job that we talked about that I was actually the assigned on this one.
Yeah.
I remember fingerprinting. I mean, we fingerprinted everything, and we actually brought some stuff back. I remember we brought, I don't know if there was a pizza box or like soda cans, maybe some beer cans. We brought them back and super glued them, where we tried to get fingerprints off of those objects, where we actually brought them back to the unit and did them under a controlled environment. But I remember fingerprinting the door. I think a whole lot of people have been in and out of the door. I remember there was I don't know if a coffee table or a glass table, and I believe we got some fingerprints, but I don't remember anything ever coming back to anybody other than Mr. Gongs.
Yeah. Now, there was a whole bunch of supposition about what this was about. There was some money found in the house as well. Was there not, inside a sneaker or a sneaker box on the?
I do remember that. There was a rolled up. It was a pretty good knot of money in a sneaker at the bottom of the steps leading to the second floor.
Yeah. So if somebody came in after the shooting or when the shooting was over, tried to clean out the house, if there was something there, because there were some allegations this could possibly be drug related. That's never been proven. No drugs were recovered, if I'm correct. Am I right about that?
Yeah, I don't remember ever getting any drugs out of his house.
Yeah, large cache of money though was there, and I think there was some question about why that money was left behind. But if it was in a sneaker, probably the people who were in there didn't know it was there.
Yeah, I remember as an afterthought just looking in the sneaker, and I'm like, "Whoa, look at this!"
Yeah. Now, when you guys check the house, you start from the front door and work your way in, especially if it's a mob hit. Now you have homicide involved. You probably have FBI agents there, other investigators, things like that. They want to go over the whole house, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. And you're looking for weapons too. Maybe there's a gun in there. I don't think there was. I don't remember ever finding a gun. I mean, it's not uncommon to find. Everybody has a gun nowadays. You're allowed to have a gun in your house. I guess he was a convicted felon, so he probably can't have a gun. Mm-hmm. It doesn't stop people from having guns.
Yeah, he had just gotten out of prison in the John Stanford case, as a matter of fact. Did a few years in prison and then got out. Let me talk a little bit here, if I can. There were a lot of people trying to figure out after this happened, why did it happen? The timing of this, Joey Merlino, boss of the mob, and all his crew, 9 or 10 defendants are in prison at the time. He supposedly selected Joe Ligambi to be the interim boss at the time. This followed a year earlier, the murder of Raymond Long John Martirano, which we talked about on the last episode. That was also on Joe Ligambi's watch, if you want to call it that, when he's the head of the mob. If indeed these were mob hits, he's the interim boss of the mob at the time. And this case comes months later, in 2003. So some of the reasoning out there heard and passed around by investigators was Johnny Gongs womanizing in South Philadelphia, his apparent attempt to join the Gambino crime family in New York. There was some evidence of that taking place, that he made overtures while he was in prison to go to New York and join the Gambino crime family. There was a book written about John Alight, the government cooperator. There's some references to that in there. Johnny was famous for using his fists. Got into a few fracases in local bars and things like that over the years. Was allegedly involved in a stabbing incident involving a celebrity musician. Not charged in that case, but that rankled a lot of people. And then there were allegations and information passed around that he had years before that fired into the home of Ligambi's brother's house, barely missing Ligambi's brother and his son. He's never been charged with that. There's never been any real pursuit of that that I'm aware of. But all of those were reasons that were kicked around and have been talked about in court cases, on court documents, FBI documents, things like that. So those are the reasons kind of out there. John, when you're on the crime scene, it's not your job to look for a motive, but do you look for stuff that might support a motive or give them an idea where to go on a motive?
I guess if the detectives had information like that, we would. Again, like I talked last time, my existence is to collect evidence and document a scene. So all the behind the scenes stuff, I really don't get involved with.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, especially with a mob job, you'll find detectives whispering to themselves that they don't want you to hear anyway, which really I don't. But like again,
it could affect you gathering whatever you're gathering.
You don't want to be swayed one way or the other. And I told you, like, especially, big jobs like something like this, the information that comes in is usually wrong at the beginning, and usually so wrong. So yeah, you don't want to be swayed by misinformation. And it does take away from my job. My job is to collect the evidence and like I said, document the scene.
Yeah. And you would think, you described that neighborhood for me. It's a row house in the middle of the block on Durfor Street, down the block from a market, kind of right in the middle of the block. You talked the last couple of shows about witnesses, how important they are in a mob case, and you barely or rarely ever get them. If a gunshot or multiple gunshots went off inside that house, you would think people in the adjoining houses would hear that.
You would think, and again, the only thing I kind of remember is he laid there for a little bit before anybody found him. And that's probably the reason we didn't handle it till the next day. I mean, I don't know how long he lived afterwards, but if you're asking me about Durfor Street, it's the only time I've ever been on Durfor Street.
Yeah.
Ever. And that should tell you, what a good neighborhood it is. I handle jobs in some blocks that you're there 3 or 4 times a year.
For a shooting or a homicide.
Exactly. And here I've never been on Durfor Street since.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. We talk about witnesses and stuff like that. I have spent a considerable amount of time looking into this murder and other mob hits in Philadelphia. And I know for a fact that there was at least one witness who observed 3 individuals standing under a street light down the block in front of a market, about a half a block away prior to the shooting. Someone who was on the block at the time. I believe police and FBI agents identified who those 3 people were, but no charges have ever been filed in this case. No one's ever been arrested. One of those individuals was mentioned in a court case over in Jersey, a big investigation in South Jersey. Nothing ever came of that. No one's ever been charged with that. So that this is one of those open cases that kind of still rankled the FBI and homicide detectives, 5 or 6. Those are the reasons we're talking about this with John Taggart, who's worked on all of those scenes, just to pick his brain a little bit about that. John, leaving behind the money, a big roll of cash like that could start you down the road. Or maybe was this drug related? Was it gambling related? Was it a loan sharking situation? That's a lot of cash to be rolled up in a sneaker on a stair in the home of a dead mob associate like Johnny Gongs.
It wasn't a robbery, and nothing. Like I said, it was a really nice house. Nothing was in disarray. And getting back to that last point, if they must have developed that information later on, because they would have had me taking a photograph, a point of reference photograph on the block, and I was never asked to do anything like that.
Yeah, I believe that was developed later on. Someone might have come forward. Interesting. I was on the scene the night you guys were processing the crime scene. The late Jack Cummings, who passed away a few years back from homicide unit, was handling the case. And they recovered a number of Polaroid pictures, shots, regular pictures taken from cameras and stuff in the basement of the home. And we're going through those on the back trunk of one of the police cars and stuff like that, and asked me if I knew any of the people in the photo from outside the crime scene tape. And I knew a couple of people that were in the pictures. None of them had anything to do with a suspect. I think they were just acquaintances of Johnny Casasanto. And, I don't know where any of that ever went, but they did collect up I think it was a whole shoebox full of pictures down in the basement. Now, is that part of your job too, or did the detectives take that?
I would have liked to known that and maybe photograph them. This is the first I'm hearing of that, so I didn't know anything about that.
Yeah. Okay. We're 20 years past this murder. I know they've tried repeatedly to try and crack this case and, come up with some kind of at least a motive, individuals who might have been involved, talk to other people who've been arrested about what they know about the case, things like that. Was there anything at all, John, that was recovered on that scene that you think could have been helpful leading towards that? Or was the scene pretty pristine, as we call it, in terms of leading police to a potential suspect?
Other than maybe lifting some fingerprints, I don't ever remember getting the results of that. Maybe that goes to the FBI. They're really close-lipped about these investigations. So, again, they're almost business like these murders. So nobody talks. There's no witnesses. The gun's gone. The gun's probably a half hour after that murder. Like I said, on the other ones, gone. We never find these guns. And then maybe once in a while you'll hear that, they put it into an indictment and they plead guilty to something somewhere down the road. But, I got to believe no one's looking into these jobs.
Yeah.
I got to believe that.
Yeah.
Especially at a 20-year mark. At some point, you got to say, all right, we got to put our resources elsewhere.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you look at all the murders and things like that in Philadelphia, we're over the 500 mark 2 years ago, that kind of situation. You hear the mob guys, attorneys say this all the time, that their resources for the police department, the FBI, would be better used. Taxpayer money would be better used looking into gun running, drugs, murders, and carjackings in Philadelphia, not 20-year-old murders. It almost sounds to me like kind of you're in that same frame of mind about this.
I am, because there's more recent murders and there's better technology now, and evidence is collected better. Again, I don't remember touch swabbing anything back then. We probably didn't. I'm not going to say we didn't know about it, but it was never asked. I know we started swabbing guns around that time. Like every gun that came in that was collected in the city, we swabbed.
For DNA.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that started around then. And like I said, we were doing stranger rapes with DNA. I had to look into. I can probably call down to work and say, when did we really start swabbing for touch DNA on cars, houses, doorknobs? I don't think we were doing it then. It was just fingerprint.
And one of the things you didn't have at the time was Ring doorbell cameras, and everybody on the block with a camera pointed out the window. In South Philadelphia, folks worry about their cars parked on the street. So every house has a camera on the front of the house pointed out to where they park their car. So if anybody messes with their car, they get video of the individual who might be tinkering with it or trying to steal it or causing damage to their home. 2003, I don't think there was a lot of that. There was some cameras on the block, I'm sure, but not that level that you have today. We talked about this on one of the last murders, that if you had cameras at the level you have them on now, 20 years later, that probably would walk you right to the killers.
I had a job on Mellon Street that the same detective collected video evidence from perpetrators getting off the subway 2 blocks away, follow them all the way to the crime scene, catch the crime scene on a Nest camera with sound, and then we followed them all the way back almost to their houses, which we're miles away. It's just it's a complete game changer for us with video. But like I said, I mean, it's not so much now, but when it first came around, video, it would be a crutch to detectives, because if they didn't, that's the first thing they asked. They weren't detecting a lot. They would run out and try to find video, and now they've married the two together. You still got to go out and knock on doors and gather witnesses, but I mean, just look at. I think last night I saw two or three murders on TV.
Yeah.
One in New York, the stabbing. I mean, they're just brutal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, George Anastasia and I talk about this a lot on Mob Talk, that we haven't had a mob murder in Philadelphia in 11 years. And probably the reason for that is just what you're talking about. The sophistication of the evidence gathering with DNA, the sophistication of the cameras, the number of cameras that are out there, the ability of the police to go track back these cameras all the way possibly to the suspect's house. In the case of the Center City guy who stomps out the windshield we just talked about, the back windshield, I mean, it literally led them to a location where he took his helmet off so they could get his ID. He had his helmet on the entire time during the crime. And now a couple of blocks away, he takes a rest with his buddies, takes his helmet off, and now they have a picture of him. So, I mean, that might explain why you don't see a lot of mob murders these days, which is a good thing. But I'm sure FBI and detectives would like to have something along those lines that would help them with these 6 murders that we're talking about.
I think the neighborhoods too have changed in the city greatly. I think that's also affected the mob. Like, South Philly's integrated now, and it's not like it used to be. A lot of the Italians have moved to Washington Township, New Jersey.
Yeah,
I think they call it.
Yeah,
South Philly East.
Yeah,
so,
and there seems to be a more interest in people coming forward when they hear gunshots. Maybe make a phone call. They see somebody on the block. They see a car leaving. That kind of thing. I know you don't get as much cooperation as you would like sometimes from the public, but those kind of things, those kind of witnesses who hear things or see a fleeing vehicle, those are vitally important to help an investigation like this, which didn't have a lot to go on at the beginning.
Correct. And going back to the motorcycle guy with jumping on the windshield, I was wondering where that video came from, and I think they put out today it was a cell phone camera from a tour bus, a double-decker tour bus.
Right. Somebody was up top videotaping the bikes going by, and this developed right in front of them.
How great is that, man?
Yeah.
Now, I hope they do something to that person. I hope they find them, and they should get accommodation, or they should get something.
Yeah, no doubt about it.
Without that, there's nothing.
Yeah. Okay, John, that's it for the John Casasanto murder. Nobody's been charged in that case. Our thoughts and prayers and stuff go out to his family. I'm sure 20 years later, this is going to be a rough year for them, thinking about what happened with that case. But the bottom line is nobody's been arrested yet. I'm sure they'd like to see justice at some point. Thanks for coming on the show again, John. We're going to talk about another murder coming up next week, the murder of Gino Marconi. John also worked on that case. Some interesting twists in that case as well. We're going to talk about that next week. John, thanks for coming on this week.
Thanks for having me, Dave.
All right, that's it for Philly Prime Podcast and Mob Talk Sit Down this week. We'll see you next week.